I was promoting fostering in a hospital foyer. And it's not patients I'm ever after, it's nurses, which sounds really wrong, doesn't it? I have never climbed Kilimanjaro. I've never been whitewater rafting, but I am convinced a child that not every adult is dangerous. You know, a building can be knocked down, a tree can be cut down, but if you put love into a kid and care into a kid, that really does last forever. Here is Diplodocus. Diplodocus is 7 billion years old, and I've got my little foster card. It says foster for Liverpool. Did you know there's no top age to foster? Really, a foster carer's job is to keep a child safe. The second part, which is to convince the child they are safe, is much, much harder. But there have been some moments, Joey, where you go, what have we done this for?
Hi, how are you, Jerry?
I'm good. You're looking pretty rough, Andy.
Well, as I predicted, the freshest flu of going back to school has resulted in my children getting unwell, my wife getting unwell, and now me getting unwell. So this weekend has been a sneezing catastrophe.
Oh dear. We've had illness in our house, but not as bad as yours by the look of it.
No,
you look terrible.
The boy's still off today. The girl went back to school, but yeah, all weekend we've been rough as.
But you're back to it today.
Well, I've got to earn some money for the household, so I am working, yeah.
We haven't actually done any sort of podcast chat for a few weeks now, have we?
Why is that?
Well, we had some technical issues. So in the interview, which we'll talk about in a second, I was doing, during that interview recording, my computer started to do these strange things where I don't think it was quite keeping up with what was going on. Okay. And then when I tried to edit, it all went kaplunk. I called our good mutual friend Craig, IT expert Craig, who suggested some upgrades to my system. And we're back.
What upgrades have you made?
Is that exciting for podcast listeners? Okay, if you are technically minded, then carry on listening. If not, you can skip the next minute. So I upgraded the motherboard because my old one was at its limit. So I needed a newer motherboard to be able to buy other stuff. That's like the board that you put stuff on. Got a better processor. I've doubled my RAM to 32 gigabytes, so they're called. Yeah. And also got something called an M2 drive.
Oh, I had that one.
Which is like a hard drive, but really small and very fast, lightning fast.
Oh, okay.
So that's exciting update on my computer, which means we can now edit the podcast again.
I've got no idea what you're talking about.
Right. I think there's about a minute of technical chat. So welcome back.
Welcome
to
back.
The non-technical listeners of the pod. So it was probably about 3 weeks ago now. I interviewed a really wonderful guy. His name's Phil Watson. And we sort of connected with him through Twitter because he's got a bit of a following on Twitter and social media. He does some quite wacky stuff. So I think the first thing I saw, he had posted, I think he was wearing a bucket hat outside a football stadium with his like Foster for Liverpool sort of badge thing he was holding up. I thought, this guy looks interesting. So I started following and we got chatting and he agreed to come on the podcast and chat to us about his role. Really interesting guy.
So this is someone you've never met before in person?
No, we've never met in person. No, we've got loads in common though. So he is a foster carer, his wife and him are foster carers. They've also then adopted. They've also got birth children. He used to be a secondary teacher. Very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's from London, but now lives in Liverpool. And it was just a really good conversation. So we talk a lot about his role as a recruiter for Liverpool Council, kind of how he tells people about fostering, some of the issues and barriers, but also tells his story throughout as well about why he came to foster. And also some really wonderful stories of people who perhaps at first you think wouldn't consider fostering or adoption, but then did, and now have kind of seen the lives of children transform. So really powerful, some of the stuff he said. So I do recommend this conversation.
Well, why don't we take a listen?
Let's listen. Welcome, Phil, to the Other People's Kids podcast. It's great to meet you.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Well, now, for the listener, we've already been on this Zoom call for about 25 minutes. I think we thought we'd have a quick chat before we started, and we've just gone off on all sorts of tangents. So it's been great. I think it's nice to meet someone who's something similar experiences, as we'll find out. And it's just been great to chat to you, Phil. So I'm excited for what you can share with our listeners.
Any opportunity to talk, and I will take it. I can only apologise, but I'm not really very apologetic.
No, it's fine. So the first thing I want to ask you for, slightly before we get into kind of fostering, how you got there and all that sort of stuff, I first connected with you through Twitter.
Mhm.
And interestingly, on your Twitter, your X, whatever we call it now, it
Yep.
says, let me read it, purveyor of quality compost.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Well, I think it says, does it say birth dad, foster dad, adopted dad?
It says, yeah, I'll get on
Yeah,
to that.
it says some other things as well. It doesn't just
Yeah.
say, and I just, you know, when people put things that are relatively po-faced, and maybe that is just me trying to be funny.
Oh,
But it's
okay.
surprising. Occasionally, though, people have messaged me going, tell me more about the compost. And if
Yeah.
anyone is interested in compost, I do have some opinions on it. I've got a compost heap. I live, by the way, in sort of relatively central Liverpool. I can see Penny Lane if you're a Beatles fan from where I'm sitting. But we have a compost heap, and maybe it's just my personality. I became slightly obsessed with the composting process. But we don't have enough garden to use the compost that we generate. But if you want to know about compost, we'll do a podcast on that later.
I'm sure the listeners are loving chat about compost.
Yeah.
So Phil, I don't know if you just want to say a bit about who you are. Kind of, I often ask in interviews, how would your kids describe you and your family?
Well, that's a scary question. It depends on the day. So I am originally from a place called London. I came to Liverpool as a student in the late 80s. I met my wife in a laundrette in the halls of residence. We got married. All things pretty standard. We live in a semi-detached house by Penny Lane in Liverpool. My wife is a lawyer, and I was a teacher for a long time. I was an export manager briefly, then a teacher. We got 2 birth kids, 2 bio kids. Then we started fostering, and we ended up with a lovely long story of adopting one of our foster kids. And then I got a role promoting fostering for Liverpool City Council. So I think they call me the catchy title of Foster Carer Recruitment Coordinating Officer. I just say, I know it's good, isn't it? I just say I work in foster promotion. So I spend quite a lot of time trying to talk to people about fostering, what it means. And if they're interested, I talk to them about the process of becoming a foster carer, what it might mean day in, day out. And I've sort of fallen into doing a little bit of work helping people who are adopters and some of the challenges that they may face. And not every adopter has those challenges, but I go on about it a lot on social media. So people that approach me like you, Jamie, and go, tell us a little bit more about your experience. And because I like talking and I'm a massive show-off, which is what they used to call extroverts, isn't it? You're a show-off. Like, I'm an extrovert now. It sounds better. I'm very happy to talk about those sort of issues with a view to, because I like showing off, but also maybe somebody can learn from some of the mistakes we've made so they can avoid some of the pitfalls that certainly we've fallen into over the years.
So in terms of, your family setup then, so not in terms of particular ages, so where are your children at in terms of secondary, primary, university, work?
We started fostering when our kids were 5 and 7. It's actually, I think it's the anniversary this weekend or week of when my wife said, I've got a babysitter, we're going out on a date. And I thought, oh, great, how exciting, are we going to the cinema? But we were going to an information event run by Liverpool City Council to find out about fostering. And this is a rather lame joke. As far as date nights go, it wasn't very romantic, but we did end up with more children. So,
what was the response? Because I had a similar experience, because we started fostering when our boys were even younger. I think 3 and 2, or 4 and 3 or something. And how did your family and friends respond? Did you have any sort of negative? Because we had quite a few people saying, well, what are you doing? What, you should wait until they're older. And
I think if you have birth kids, you don't have to have birth kids to foster. But if you do, and if you don't wonder what impact will this have on our birth children, you're really stupid, and you probably shouldn't be allowed to foster. And I mean that in all seriousness. So we did have, when we decided we're going to apply, which doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be approved to foster. Our wider family, I like to think we brought them along on the journey, but probably we could have communicated more. But certainly our parents, so the grandparents of our children, did go, what about your own kids? And you went, yep, that's the best question. And I'd like to think that we always said, if our kids say no at any point, we will stop doing this. They are fundamentally our primary responsibility. Our kids now, they're 20 and 22, and our adopted son is 17. So we've done this a long time. It's been part of our it's been part of our life. It's kind of our own DNA. And I realise as well how much our wider family have become part of this. And a lot of our wider family, so the sort of the younger generation, if you like, our children's cousins, they've never really known anything different either. They just go, oh yeah, there's an extra kid, or there's this kid, or there's this. That's just how they live. So it's become very much part and parcel of how we live. And I find this very often as well with when I talk to potential foster carers, is how many people, without really reflecting on it, have grown up in a family where there were, shall we say, other people's children.
Yeah.
But it never crossed my mind at the time. But when we were going through the approval process to become foster carers, one of the questions from our assessing social worker was, is there any other sort of people in your family that aren't sort of DNA linked? And I realized that as a child, we often had a girl living with us for the summer holidays. And I asked my mum, who was Mel? And my mum went, oh, that was my cousin's daughter. And there was a bit of mischief going on. So she came to live with us regularly.
Wow.
I thought, actually, we were family and friends, foster carers. It just wasn't called that.
That wasn't formal.
It wasn't formal. It was a private arrangement. And I guess it's what a lot of families do around the globe, but certainly in sort of Western Europe is we will wrap around this child because their own parents, for whatever reason, can't quite do the parenting, and we will raise them. And I wonder if there's a lot of wisdom in that broader, there's a great, we talk about nuclear families in England. There's a great Yiddish word, mishpocha, which is kind of your extended family. It's the places where you could walk in and put the kettle on and go into the fridge without asking. And we used to, I think, in England, have that much more. Families maybe live separately now. They've moved away, they've moved here and everywhere. So there's not the same wider family raising children. So when a parent gets ill, there's a bereavement, there's an issue with who knows what, there's no one to step in except for the state.
Yeah. Which is sad in a way, isn't it? The way that we're set up in terms of family life is more fragmented, and I guess also why we have such, the increase in kinship care, which I think is a positive.
Yeah.
But that's quite tricky, isn't it, when people live in different places and movements? And I think just going back to kind of impact on children, so would you say it's sort of largely been a positive experience then? Because my sons both see themselves as part of the team that we care for these children. Actually, we regularly look at our boys, so they're both teenage boys now, how they are with the children we care for, and they're so loving and caring. I think they've learned that through fostering. Would you say it's been largely positive for your kids?
I think it's been largely positive. I would say that things like kindness, patience, love, looking out for people with less than our own, that's kind of one of our, if you could say what are the Watson key values, we'd probably say that. I think lots of families would say that. We've just taken it a little step further, and certainly our birth kids have been, like you say, absolutely vital to the process. And bizarrely, it's a lovely little story about our son when he started secondary, our birth son. A bit weird saying that because I just called them the kids, but for the point of this podcast, it makes sense. When he started secondary school, they were sort of doing this group work with a teacher about, what primary school did you come from and who do you live with? And he said, I went to this primary and we live with whoever we're fostering. And the whole sort of class went, what? And he knew it was an unusual way of living, but he don't think he'd quite appreciated that, and neither had we, that, suddenly you're the example of fostering that these other kids have. You're the first example they've encountered, or possibly the first one that's been explicit about it. And I think his classmates thought he lived in some sort of Tracy Beaker dumping ground.
Like a house of that,
yeah. And he went, no. But that's often kids or young, certain age group. That's their reference point is, you must live in the dumping ground, and lots of children must come and go. It's like, no. It's actually not like that at all. We have one child, and we've had this child for a long time. And some social workers come round, but quite frankly, I ignore them. But it was an interesting reference point, and certainly we fostered as a family, not just me and my wife and our birth kids, but actually uncles, brothers, cousins, grandparents. It's a whole wraparound thing, which I guess is probably anthropologically, is that a word, how we were all meant to be raised. It's a community, it's a village to raise a child. So definitely positive, but there have been some moments, Joey, where you go, what have we done this for? I do remember when we had a little boy who arrived on the Friday in August. He was 6, and we got him in. It was like term started on the Monday or the Tuesday, so we got him into the same primary school as our kids. He couldn't stay at his own primary for sort of safety reasons. And so I've got this, and it is on Twitter or X. It's my birth son leading this foster child into primary school, walking down the road. That was one of my sort of mega hits on Twitter. Normally I'm up to 5 or 6 likes if I'm lucky. And this one went a bit crazy, got up to thousands. And it is a lovely picture. This is on a broken camera, broken phone. And what we didn't quite realise is the 6-year-old was in the infants playground, and our son was in the juniors playground. But our son had kind of made a little rota of him and his mates who were probably in year 4 or 5, just to go over to check on this foster kid. And there was a sort of sense of ownership of him, which was lovely. Going, he's our foster kid. If anyone winds him up or bullies him, I can, because I'm his foster brother. But if anyone else should in any way interfere in his well-being, we will sort them, because we're year 5 boys. And I just thought, that's actually a very typical relationship between siblings, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, my brother is older than me. When we were little, he was allowed to batter me and make fun of me and whatever else. But if anyone else did, it's like, no, that's my role. You do not pick on my brother. So I agree with you though. What we've always gone for is a gap, a natural gap, if you like, of daughter top dog, son foster kid is like 2 or 3 years younger. That pecking order has worked.
So a bit more specifically about your role now. So obviously you were a teacher for a long time, secondary teacher. I was as well. We talked about that earlier, didn't we, before we started recording? We could to a dinosaur school, but we went. Your role is to recruit, isn't it, foster carers?
Yeah.
How does that look?
I'm sure everybody who's got their ear to the ground will know that the number of children going into care in this country is going up and up. The number of kids in care to give you an image, it would fill every seat at Wembley Stadium would be filled by a child in care, and some would have to sit in the kind of gantries and be squished into the toilets and all over the place. It's an enormous number, and it's gone up and up and up. And the number of foster carers in the country, mainstream, so not family and friends, is not keeping pace with that. And no council that I'm aware of, and no charity fostering agency that I'm aware of, and no private agency that I'm aware of, is able to find the foster carers that they need to deal with this number of children, but also perhaps the complex needs of the children. So a wonderful children's services director at Liverpool, who I did know because I taught her kids, bizarrely, her own kids, she said, what we need is not a marketing company, although they could be very good. We need somebody who knows about fostering more than anyone else. And so they just put out a little job description to all their foster carers saying, would you like to help us recruit foster carers? And I put my hand up and applied. I think some other people did. So I just became the front, if you like, or the person on the tin saying, talk to Phil, because he actually does do it. This is the lifestyle that he actually leads. So I had a sort of blank piece of paper with, well, go for it, whatever you think might work. And I'm quite, I guess, self-starting. Is that the word we'd say in entrepreneurship? And I just started to go, right, I'm going to go and find places to hang out with a sign and a banner and as much merchandise as I can get the council to buy. And I'm
those t-shirts, that t-shirt you're wearing?
Yeah, this is foster form. There we go. There. I don't really take it off. And I just thought, right, where is a potential foster carer likely to be? And I just thought, right, where can people find these? So I go to local council sports centres, and I set up in the foyer next to the vending machine, and people who are coming to spin classes stop and have a chat, or because it's advertised on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, people will go, oh, actually, I want to find out about fostering, and they'll come along, and I can sort of spot them now. It's people looking slightly worried, looking and going, and I go, hello, welcome. I am the foster guy. It's as informal as it looks.
Yeah. We're
sitting round a table in a sports centre or in a foyer of a hospital or a library. And one of the first things I always say is, I'm my name is Phil. We started fostering in 2011. I live up the road by Penny Lane. So everyone knows that in Liverpool and the rest of the world. I am paid to talk to you, but I'm not on a commission. the last thing you ever want to do is convince somebody to foster when they don't want to or shouldn't, because you'll get a monetary kickback, which is where I really struggle with a lot of the monetization of the foster industry. So and then I'll chat, and after 2 or 3 hours, sometimes I will say, nothing you say to me, I don't report back to anyone what you say. I'll just tell you how we got into fostering, what it means day in, day out, and you can interrupt me anytime you want and ask anything you want. And if I know the answer, I'll help you. And if I don't, I'll just say, I don't know. I've never had that experience. I might refer them to somebody who has. And then the dream is those people will then apply, or they might already be going through the application process. And then they will they'll be able to make a much more informed decision about, oh, yeah. So Phil's family managed to do this with, and we're like, this we're so, whatever the word is, what we so traditionally, Pebble Dash house, man, woman, 2 kids. We've had a variety of pets that have all died, and we've buried them in the garden. And I'm often will talk to people and go, you don't have to be heterosexual, you don't have to have children, all the rest of that. So I know all that as well. And then I began, because I'm, say, a big show off, I just began to start, if no one was coming to see me, I ended up just going up and talking to people. And people, the person in the sports centre that's selling the tickets to the swimming pool, if they're not busy, I'll go, oh, hello, who are you? What are you doing? And I'll end up chatting about fostering. And then I ended up starting to go on social media a lot and making the most, well, I thought they were really funny. Not everyone thought that, Joe. It's hard to believe. But they're basically like ridiculous. So I don't know. I was in a museum, it's a good example. And they've got some, Liverpool Museum, they've got a sort of statue of some dinosaur that's 7 billion years old or something. I don't know how it is.
Oh, no, this one.
Yeah, it's okay. Here is Diplodocus. Diplodocus is 7 billion years old. And I've got my little foster card that says foster for Liverpool. Did you know there's no top age to foster? And I'll just segue in. And like, I think there was a dark Doctor Who one. Like, nobody knows how old Doctor Who is because he's a Time Lord. Did you know that the minimum age to foster is 21? Nobody could the TARDIS be a foster opportunity? How many beds has it got? There's a good question. Has the TARDIS got a spare bedroom? But then being in Liverpool, there's various references to the Yellow Submarine, as in the town where I was born. So the Yellow Submarine, there's a great line here, all our friends live next door. And I'm going, oh, the Yellow Submarine has capacity for friends. And therefore, if you live on a yellow sub, you could foster, although I'd imagine there's a safeguarding issue around being in open water, because that's a big issue, isn't it? Should you have a pond or a swimming pool? And purely for my own amusement, I began to make up these posts, and they just began to get occasion. I mean, I'm not famous, I'm not an influencer, but they began to get traction. And I'm thinking, how do I wedge in something about fostering here? So it could be quite serious. I might go to a pride event and go, pride is the opposite of shame. Many of the children that go into care feel shame as if it's their fault. It is never the fault of a child when they're in foster care. It's never the fault of a child when their birth family can't look after them. So sometimes it's flippant, sometimes it's a bit more meaningful, but all the time I'm just thinking, if I'd never thought about fostering, how would this post land? And if I was thinking about fostering, would this help me? It's an easy way to communicate a message about fostering, because most people that I talk to have got a vague idea. They do often confuse it with adoption, and then they've seen Little Orphan Annie or Despicable Me, or whatever the particular, or Harry Potter is a really kind of unfortunate one, isn't it, of kinship care. I've reflected on that so much, of going, any time in the media, whether it's a Brothers Grimm pantomime, stepsister, stepmother scenario, or Harry Potter or whatever, it's almost always negatively portrayed. The auntie and uncle who are vicious and horrible. James and the Giant Peach, you go and live with some insects. I mean, it's all over. I mean, Paddington Bear does well, doesn't he? Because he goes and lives with the Brown family. But you're thinking, these are real children, and they really need real people, not bears or not insects, to look after them. And so I don't know why, because I've had such a stable upbringing, that I've got this particular desire to go, right, how do we make this little person feel like they belong and feel that they're safe? It's become something that I live and breathe.
I know, for part of my job, so working for fostering charities, we talk a lot about encouraging recruitment, things like that. And the figures show, don't they, that kind of talking to someone or knowing someone who's doing it already is one of the biggest drivers of someone to consider fostering. So actually, for you to be out there talking to people, sharing your story in such an infectious way, I think it's got to make it. Does it feel like can you see any difference yet?
I'll tell you what. Because I work for a wonderful group of people at Liverpool, but also a wider group called Foster 4 that's about a bunch of local authorities all working together, and they're brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Because maybe I live where I work, if that makes sense. And this doesn't happen every day by any means, but I was at a music festival relatively recently in Liverpool. It's a free one because that's how we live around here. Yeah. And this fella came up to me, and this might make me cry, and we want to be 20 minutes in. And he went, "Do you remember meeting me? You're Phil, aren't you?" And I went, "I am called Phil. I don't remember meeting you." And then we met in this park, in this cafe, and I came with my wife to talk to you about fostering. And you realised that actually we weren't interested in fostering. We were interested in adoption. And I was like, okay, because as an adopter as well, I'm very happy to sort of go, this fostering is not what you want. I think you want this. And I hadn't seen or heard of these people for some years, but they'd gone through the process to adopt, and they were there with their child.
Wow.
And I mean, for me, it was like I'd had a 2-hour conversation with them, but this guy was like, like I've got now. He had slightly sort of teary eyes, going, "Thank you so much. Those 2 hours really made a difference." And I guess that's fundamentally what I like doing. It's a bit, is it narcissistic to want to make a difference? I don't know, but it was like, wow, I had a tiny role in that kid and subsequent kids, because I know they adopted again, having a family that was, by all, from what I could see, was totally working. And when I bump into foster carers who have got a kid or kids, and I go, we had a conversation 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, and I go, wow, I helped with that. I always want to point out as well, no one comes to see me with no interest in fostering, and by the end of 2 hours, or whatever the chat is, definitely goes, I'm now going to foster. It's always a longer journey. It's always, and I am a small part in that journey, giving information or maybe stimulating the first thought. So even when you're, and I hang around in shopping centres too, with my sign and my pens and my merch, and people might come and go, what is it again? And I go, well, there's, I have to sort of decide how I'm going to picture. I go, and I normally go with a story rather than any numbers, because people don't care so much about big statistics. But I go, we started fostering and we fostered 7 children. And people go, really? Is that all? Because when I hear about fostering, they always foster hundreds. I go, yeah, well, if you do babies, it might be, and you're just trying to draw them in, and it might be a 2-minute or a 5-minute conversation. And I think, to use the analogy, it's like a little seed planted. Who knows if in 3, 4, 5 years they might consider fostering, but at least they've got more information to make the decision.
And hopefully a positive interaction as well, because all the negative portrayals in the media and all the news stories where it goes wrong, meet some of the positive stories of the impacts it can make.
And there's a big discussion about prisons are full, and one of the discussions is a third of the people in prison have got care experience. And you can look at that 2 ways. Well, I just think that's appalling. What we've got to do is have better care. And when kids leave care because they're old or older, we've got to go, well, I've got a 20-year-old. He still lives here in our house. He's going to live till, I don't know when he's going to move out. Never. He loves living here. But you're thinking, well, why do we expect a child who's got care experience to be able to move out and live independently? We all talk about bank of mum and dad, and we all talk about, I'd still ring my mum if I was making a lemon meringue pie and go, how do I do this? And I'd say I'm 54. Most of us take that for granted. And it's I think it's a Lemon Sissay quote. Family is the privilege you should be able to take for granted. But what if you haven't got one? Well, we need those of us who have got a family. If we can share in any way, that's brilliant. And I like to think that even if some of the people I talk to never foster themselves, there's a pretty good chance they'll encounter somebody who's been in care, or they might have a family member that's a kinship or mainstream foster carer. So mainstream means you foster for kids that you don't have any link with. They'll be a little bit more understanding and have a little bit more knowledge about it. So it is a fulfilling role. It's a very in encouraging occasionally when foster care is portrayed positively or an adoption on TV and in a realistic way. So there was one recently, Lost Boys and Fairies. It's about a
it's
gay
brilliant.
couple.
Yeah.
And I just thought, we watched that and we were a little bit going, this is as good as we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it's not everything about it was, you thought that couldn't happen. But occasionally you think, oh, for goodness sake, media, just 5 minutes research. And you know that just could not happen and it wouldn't happen. It's ridiculous.
I particularly, for that, I mean, we really enjoyed that. I think it was in the final one. I guess it's okay to talk about it in a bit more detail now without a bit of spoiler. With the mum, the birth mum, at the end or near the end, with that conversation, I thought that was done so well.
Yes,
just in the understanding that, you know, children have parents. They're still their parents, and there's a loss and there's a grieving and there's so complex, and I think they managed to show some of that. And also that the mums and the questions he asked about, do you have a garden? I just thought that so speaks of, you know, I'm getting teary now. It so speaks of, you know, parents love their children still, and sometimes because of the circumstances they're in, because of where they found themselves, usually not through fault of their own, they're not able to provide the care for that child. And you think, wow. So that's a fantastic portrayal. And you're right, there's some things that are less realistic. Yeah. I thought the panel, because I sat on a few panels, the panel was interesting. You done, how they almost done like such a good speech that you convinced them through his speech. I was like, that's not how panels work. You don't do a little monologue and then go, oh, okay then.
Let's all go. Yeah. It's a little bit, but it was a good portrayal, I thought. I like that Lost Boys and Fairies. I thought the foster care was formidable and brilliant, if you remember her. The only thing I wasn't sure about is how she'd managed to foster hundreds of children, and yet they weren't babies. She'd managed to deal with older kids as well as younger.
Yeah, the high rate, wasn't it?
And certainly, I know from other foster friends how if you want to get an MBE, and I don't know if you've got one, Joey, if you want to get an MBE in fostering or OBE, there's always like so-and-so has got an MBE, and they fostered 400 children. And I always think that is amazing. And people are all great. And then people, because I've got a blog about that, we've fostered 7. And people go, is that all? And they go, well, it made a difference to them. And also, it's actually, I've got numerous friends that have gone, well, we started to foster, a child arrived, and it worked. They had nowhere else to go, so they stayed.
Yeah,
and that's it. That's much better.
Yeah,
that's much better. It's much better to stay with one family where you begin to feel so much more comfortable and confident and safe, and you feel much more part of that family than, I bounced around in and out of care. That it's multiple, that horrible phrase, placements. Much better to arrive somewhere and stay put. Counting days and nights is much more useful than numbers of children that came in and out of your care. I mean, if you wanted to foster babies, which is a kind of a very popular thing to do relative to other age ranges, people think I'd rather have a newborn than a teenager because a newborn is less likely to swear at you and whatever else. And then those children often will go back in with birth family or be adopted. And then the numbers can be relatively high. But actually, if you can take a little kid, there's a starfish story here, isn't there? Do you know it? There's
on the beach with the
the starfish washed up,
throwing back in.
And you go, but it makes a difference to that one. And actually making a difference to one child is you are generationally making a difference as well.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate the importance of that and the value of that. It's a beautiful thing. What was the question? I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. So we're getting through. We're sort of getting through the questions as planned-ish. So the other thing I was going to ask you about your role particularly. So the reason why we do this podcast is there's many reasons, but we want to sort of encourage conversation about fostering and about adoption, and also encourage people to think about doing it themselves. Because I think a lot of people write themselves off for some of the reasons you mentioned. But I wondered, is there any sort of key sort of barriers that you find when talking to people about fostering that you're aware of? What are the main reasons people say, I could never be a foster carer because of X, Y, Z? What are the key ones?
The very simple, you've got to be over 21. There's no top age. You need a relatively clean police check. And you need to pass a medical, ideally a spare room if you're going to do foster children older than 2 or 3. I think some people disqualify themselves because they think they've had a difficult life. They go, actually, I've had some mental health issues or some physical health issues. And sometimes I go, I understand that. But you know what? That actually might make you a better foster carer.
Yeah.
So we've got a terrific lady who fosters in Liverpool. She will not mind me at all talking about her, but I was promoting fostering in a hospital foyer. And it's not patients I'm ever after. It's nurses, which sounds really wrong, doesn't it? Nurses, doctors, TAs, anybody who works. Anyway, and this lady came up to me as she was a volunteer and she was a wheelchair user. And she said, do you think I could foster? And I went, I don't know. I don't get to decide. But we had a tiny chat, a few minutes, and she applied. And thank goodness a wise social worker went, okay, so this person has a physical disability, but doesn't mean they can't foster. And now I know this lady. I'm not going to say her name, but she knows who she is. She's brilliant. And I bumped into her again the other day, and there she was in her wheelchair going down a major thoroughfare in Liverpool with 2 foster kids who are able-bodied. And you're thinking, thank goodness we had the flexibility to go, this woman is amazing. But she was ready to rule herself out. And I think it's possible that some agencies and councils would have gone, you can't foster because it's not safe. But actually, I'm going to say this, put some words into her mouth, but I've heard her say this as several words in this effect, which is when a child goes into care, they've inevitably had a bad experience of life. And I think for this particular foster carer, she has had a difficult experience of life because she's got a disability that is quite pronounced. And I think she was able-bodied and there was an accident. And she has gone, right, this is a bad thing that has happened to me. What am I going to do with this bad thing? And she has built an incredibly life that's incredibly full and enriched and enriches other people. And I think as a role model, she is far more inspiring than I ever will be. And when I meet her, I go, God, you're incredible. I'm in awe. I'm in awe of how you overcome barrier, boundary, difficulty. I think also because children in care are often portrayed so negatively in the media, people think it would be too difficult to have one. I'd find it too challenging. And then you get the polar opposite where you get the little orphan Annie kind of nonsense where children are lined up in an orphanage all looking cute and pretty. And if you choose one, you choose one out of a line and you choose the pretty one and they'll do singing and dancing for you and say, thank you for saving me. And in fact, that is definitely a red flag to me when somebody comes and goes, what I want to do is save a child. And I want them to love me because I've saved them. If you want to save a child, great. If you want to call it that, it's a horrible phrase. But the idea that you want thanks is not at all helpful.
Concerning.
So I think my dream would be everybody has considered whether they could foster, knowing the legalities and the perimeters around it, and they've decided that they're not going to. That doesn't bother me. It's when people think that they can't because, well, we've got a job or we've got this or we've got that. And you go, actually, none of those things stop you from fostering. If you don't want to, that's fine. But don't let ignorance stop you fostering, I suppose, which is why I like going on about it so much.
And that was kind of my last question. My last proper question was, how would you want to be remembered in 100 years' time? Because you've said a few times, Phil, about whether you're a narcissist or not. And I think wanting to help kids and to feel good about that, I think there's nothing wrong about it. I think, what is human life if we don't get a sense of satisfaction out of helping others and doing something to make a difference? If everyone has that mindset, we live in a better society. So you kind of answered it. So in 100 years' time, would you like it to be that you've helped everyone consider whether they could be a foster carer, or do you have any sort of great sporting ambitions?
No. It's funny what I haven't been able to do with my life because of the choices we've made. So my niece applied for me and my brother to do Race Across the World. Do you know the show?
I desperately want to do it.
Yeah. We love it. We love it. And there's been
We're
some
big fans.
the backstories are wonderful. And there was a wonderful mum and her adopted son that did the
Yeah,
trip.
the first series,
Yeah, and I kind of think some of the things, if you like, that I've never done, I've been abroad loads of times, but the kind of wandering, incredible travel journeys I've never done. Me and my wife have never done because the kids we've had, it just wasn't ever going to happen. The wandering around the Serengeti. I'm assuming that there are some foster carers and adopters that have done that, but we, to some extent, we struggle with some transitions and change.
Yeah.
And so going to hotels and abroad, we do it all the time, and we're good at it now. But we have to manage it a little bit more. So I think I put it in a blog, and I'll quote myself. That's how narcissistic I am. I have never climbed Kilimanjaro. I've never been whitewater rafting, but I have convinced the child that not every adult is dangerous, and I have convinced the child that 3 a.m. is not the time to play tennis in the street, and those tiny little things, you go, they're amazing, and not everybody has had those experiences, and we've done that thing where we've transitioned a child from foster care to adoption, and you're thinking, this is amazing. This is an amazing way of living. And to kind of trying to wrap that up a little bit with the little man that we adopted, I liked when he was younger, he's a teenager now, the older teenager, so he's not so interested in doing gardening and like planting things and going, one day this tree will be bigger than you. This tree will be here when I'm not here. This tree will probably still be here when you're old. And that longevity of putting into his head, you will always be here. This is forward planning. And that's why we do plant gardens, isn't it? That's why we plant for our children's children. And I guess who knows what will happen with our adopted son, and who knows about the other kids that are in a foster situation that's working well. But it is nice to know that difference is it's actually, a building can be knocked down, a tree can be cut down, but if you put love into a kid and care into a kid, that really does last forever. Kingdoms, money, wealth, it'll come and go, but there's something permanent and, dare I say, eternal, ephemeral, is that the right word? Transcendent about going, this love will never end, it'll last forever. I'm getting very deep on it. You've got to collect the golden moments of our little man today, who's 17. My wife's just taken him off for his first job.
Wow.
He's going to be working with he's working basically as an old people's club.
Wow.
I don't know what he'll be doing. And I'm thinking, I cannot quite fathom how far he has come from the little man who was so scared and so angry and so terrified of any change, any transition, who anything was like, no, that's too difficult for me. And now here he is, we're going to sort of drop him off, and I'm going to pick him up in a few hours, and I'm hoping it's going to go well. I'm sure it will. And you're thinking, that's amazing. I say, I've never run a FTSE 500 company either, but I've convinced the kid that he could make tea and coffee for some old people and possibly, make sure they're okay with the bingo. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you just kind of go, the management of that and the facilitation. See, these are all horrible words, aren't they? Helping a kid do that. Go, what an amazing buzz. That's brilliant. And far more people can do that than actually run large companies or become brain surgeons or whatever. It's like, actually, this is really we can all play a part in doing this. So it might be that the child lives with you or lives with us, but our wider family and friends have all been part of this. And I don't want to sort of say he's a project, because he's a real person with autonomy and his own ideas, but you're thinking, gosh, he's incredible to have come as far as he has. This kid was born with so many disadvantages, and look what he's able to do now. This is amazing. And a whole group of people, including ourselves, have been involved in helping him know that you are valuable, you are worthy, you deserve just what the rest of us take for granted. And our house will always be your home. What do they say about home? Home is the place where when you turn up, they have to let you in. And I love that one. It's like, yeah, this is where you live. This is where you can be you. You can kick off. You can be happy, sad. You can be with your family. And I think that's just a wonderful thing. I'm glad. I'm glad we chose to do this. Maybe because today it's going really well.
Well, Phil, I thank you so much. It's been inspiring. I think we hadn't spoken before today, so we had a connection on Twitter. Just to hear your heart for fostering, I think is infectious, and I think it's lovely to meet. I know you articulate so much of why I foster, why my wife and I fostered in such a lovely way. So thank you so much. I don't know if there's any sort of final words you wanted to say. 'Cause normally we ask a little question at the end, and my question was, "What brings you joy?" But I feel like with you, Phil, I know what it will be. You've almost expressed that for everything you've said. That caring for children, changing their life, brings you joy.
When I talk to people about fostering, I go, look, this is the sales pitch, okay? And they go, so are you ready for it? And it goes, it's simple. Apply to foster, because only 3 things can happen. Number one, because it will take at least 6 months. Number one is that the social workers will say, actually, this isn't for you. Or halfway through the process, you might go, now that I know more about this, I don't want to do it anymore, which is fine. Or you might get approved to foster, and then you might change a child's life. And those are the only. So if you're listening to this, find out. Fundamentally, a foster carer's job is to keep a child safe. The second part, which is to convince the child they are safe, is much, much harder because of the trauma they've often experienced. But find out about it. Don't rule yourself out. Find out about it. Contact me if you want. I don't care where you live. I know I work for Liverpool, the greatest city on the earth. But I'll chat to you more. That was meant to be a pithy summary, and I haven't got one.
Foster, I enjoyed it.
Foster, make
Foster
a difference.
now. Do it.
Do it today. Yeah.
Phil, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Brilliant.